Hello there, and welcome to Papa Nick's Music. I'm your host, Papa Nick Lewis, and today we are talking about the Knack. When I first started thinking about doing these videos, my whole thought process was that if I'm going to talk about music, I'm either going to talk about something that everybody else talks about, but my take is a little bit different, or I'm going to talk about something that apparently nobody else is talking about. And so far, the album ranking videos that I've done have been focused on artists that a lot of folks focus on. As far as I know, nobody is out there ranking the albums of the Knack, so this is virgin territory. And the fact that I'm choosing to spend time talking about something that nobody else talks about probably says something about the level of marketing strategy here at the multimedia entertainment conglomerate that is Papa Nick's Music. But I love the Knack, and I want to preach the gospel of the Knack. So we're going to spend a little bit of time ranking the albums of the Knack. The Knack are an interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon. Anybody who is of a certain age, if you were born, say, 1972, 73, or earlier than that, then you are aware of the Knack, right? You remember the summer of '79 when My Sharona was fucking everywhere. I mean, you couldn't get away from that thing. It was blaring out of every radio speaker, every cassette deck, it was everywhere. It was playing in stores. I mean, it was everywhere. You couldn't get away from it. It was hugely popular. And it's not just your imagination. It's not just, it seems in the dim recesses of my memory that it was very popular. It was hugely popular. It was a phenomenon. The album Get the Knack was released June of '79, early June '79. My Sharona was released pretty much the same time. And by the end of August, so we're talking like 2 months, the album had sold over 1 million copies, and the single My Sharona was the fastest selling single, the fastest single to hit gold as a debut single since the Beatles released I Want to Hold Your Hand. I mean, it was huge. It's amazing. I mean, and as of the last time I checked, I want to say that My Sharona has sold something like 40 million copies, which is just insane. Insane. Read in an interview with Burton Navarre, the lead guitarist for the Knack, co-writer of My Sharona. And the interviewer asked him, what are you doing now for a living? And Burton's off-the-cuff answer was that, well, for a living, every 2 weeks I go to my mailbox, because My Sharona is still, it's an amazing phenomenon. And it was an amazing phenomenon at the time. It had a huge, huge splash. So much so that, again, we're talking like a couple of months after the album is released, there's already a counterbalancing backswing, right? I mean, Sir Isaac Newton wasn't talking about pop music when he said for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, but he might as well have been. And the bigger the positive push is when the pendulum is swinging one way, the stronger the negativity is going to be when that pendulum comes back around, he said, mixing his metaphors. And the Knack were subject to that. You can't sell that many albums that quickly and not piss off a lot of people. And they did. They also had highly inept management at the time. The band's management thought, ooh, this album looks like it's going to be really popular. I've got an idea. Let's create mystique in the band. Let's don't do any press, guys. Don't do any interviews. Just if a reporter asks you a question, just, no comment and walk away. Don't engage the press. Which was just stupid advice. It was mind-bendingly stupid for them to do, because that meant that in all of the discussion in the press and in, rock music in general, all of the discussion was being driven by forces outside the band. The band they weren't participating in that conversation. And so this negative backlash that was a perfectly natural and imminently foreseeable reaction to the popularity of the album, coupled with the fact that the band, on orders from management, did not defend themselves, meant that you had a really violent backswing, so that by the end of the year, anybody who said that they liked the Knack was shunned. I mean, they were just that was so last month, right? But here's the thing. There are plenty of us, I'm sure, I don't think I'm the only one, there are plenty of us who don't really pay attention to the critics. I have absolutely no use for critics. Art criticism is, and I apologize if any of you watching this are art critics, but art criticism is the single least useful rung of society. I can't think of a bigger waste of time than being an art critic. And yes, before you leave a comment, I understand the irony of me in an album ranking video, which is essentially a critical endeavor talking about the uselessness of art criticism. Ha ha ha. Yeah, I got it. But I don't see my role as criticist. I don't see my role as critic here. I see my role as enthusiast. Beside the point. The backlash against the Knack was fierce. Guy in California was making a small fortune selling little Nuke the Knack buttons with nuke spelt with a K, so that it's Nuke the Knack. Very clever. And the Knack never could recover from that. So, it's partially the difficulty that a band has when their debut is a solid success, which happened a lot in the time. I'm thinking of Meatloaf. Bad Out of Hell was a huge album. Meatloaf never really could match it. Christopher Cross's first album was huge. Christopher Cross could never really match it. Boston's first album was huge. Arguably a perfect album, and they never quite could match it on their later releases. So when you have a really big, debut, it's already difficult to sustain that. It's even more difficult to sustain it if you are seen as last week's garbage. So most people are unaware that the Knack existed beyond that first album. But between 1979's Get the Knack and 2001's Normal is the Next Guy, so 79, 89, 99, so over a span of years there, they released 6 albums. And they are some pretty darn good albums. There's really only one in there that I'm shying away from a little bit. But there's a lot of really good music in here, so we're going to rank those 6 albums. Now, before we get into the ranking, we've got the subjectivity notice. As you can tell from my rant earlier about art critics, there is no such thing as objectively good or objectively bad art. There is only art that we like and art that we do not like. There will be things that I like that you do not, and vice versa, and that's fine. We all have different tastes. That's cool. That's a fun conversation, right? Talking with people about the stuff that they like, why they like it, the stuff that they don't like, why they don't like it. That's fun. As long as we are not telling one another that the other is objectively wrong. It is obvious. It is to any person that, no, that's not true. There's no such thing as objectively good or bad music. Um, I will very clearly identify things that I think are good and things that I think are bad, but you should never take that as a statement that I am making that objectively this is the best song ever written or anything foolish like that. We also need to talk about the ground rules. When we are ranking albums here at Papa Next Music, we focus on original studio recordings of a proper length that have as their primary purpose being a collection of songs to be listened to in one group. So, original, that means we do the original versions of things. I don't do reimagined, remastered, reprocessed stuff, and I don't do compilations, which means we're not doing any of the Knack compilations. We're not doing the retrospective, which if you're looking for a Knack compilation, retrospective is the one I would recommend. But that also means we're not going to do resume. No, we're just going to deal with Zoom. Studio albums, we're not going to do any live albums, so we're not going to be doing their release from here just a few years ago, and the name of it has slipped my mind. But it's a live recording from, I want to say 78, and I want to say it's the Troubadour. I'm sure as I speak there's a crawl running along the bottom of the screen with the relevant information. We're not going to do Rock and Roll Fun House or Rockin' Fun Party Ho, whatever the name of that stupid thing was. And I say stupid just because I'm dismissing it because I can't remember it. It's actually a very good performance. The DVD is highly, highly, highly recommended. But we're not going to do those things. We're doing the studio albums. We're also, when I'm looking at these, so my third ground rule it deals with length. We don't have to worry all of these albums are the appropriate length. We don't have any EPs that we have to worry about. But we do have one last thing, and that's I focus on albums that were written, recorded, and released to be consumed as an album for music listening purposes. And I struggled with how to pronounce or with how to explain this, but in essence, this is the thing that I use to say I'm not going to be including things like soundtracks and Christmas albums, right? They're albums, but they're not really albums. They're miscellaneous, right? And here there is something that we probably should be spending some time talking about, but I'm going to exclude from the six because it was not recorded to be released as an album, and that is 2012's Rock and Roll Is Good For You, the Figure of Air demos. Oh, excuse me, the Figure of Air demos. Every once in a while I slip and say it figure because that's how I assumed it was pronounced back when I had never heard anybody say the man's name before. As they were planning the band that became the Knack, Doug Fieger and Bert Navarre started writing songs together, and these demos of those songs are fantastic. I mean, it's well worth your time to plunk down some cash and get a copy of this thing. But it wasn't recorded to be released as an album, so I'm not counting it as one of the six. Okay, now, when we are talking about these album rankings, remember this is Papa Nick's music. So when I'm thinking about these albums, I don't think in terms of super fine distinctions. I think in terms of grades. When I'm listening to albums, I give them letter grades. I spent the bulk of my adult life as a teacher. Grading is a natural thing for me to do. If an album is a steaming pile of shit that I can't imagine anybody ever enjoying, oh, for the love of all that is holy, avert your eyes, protect the children, and quickly bury it in the backyard and salt the earth so that nothing grows from it, that's an F. If an album is just bad, I can't recommend it. It has at least one fatal flaw. It may have two or three, but there's just, it's a stinker. It's a stink. Oh, yeah. That's a D. If an album is just an album, it's okay. I don't necessarily recommend that you buy it, but I won't tell you to stay away from it either. It's just an album. It's run of the mill. It's average. It's normal. It's everyday. That's a C. Most albums, by the way, are C's. If it's good, I like this. I recommend that you get it. That's a B. And if it's really good, I strongly recommend that you get it. My respect for your musical taste will go up 3 notches if I find out that you have a copy of this. That gets it an A. And when I'm looking at these 6 albums, I've got one album that's flirting. It's low B, high C. It's in there somewhere. And I know I want to give it a low B, but it probably deserves the high C. So coming in at number 6 is 1991's Serious Fun. In terms of how this album fits in the life of the band, they formed, they gained local popularity in Los Angeles, became a popular band, playing, the Troubadour and Whiskey A Go Go, clubs like that. And they became popular enough that when touring musicians were coming through town, the musicians would go and catch the Knack playing at one of these clubs, and every once in a while they'd get up on stage and jam with them. Tom Petty, the guy from The Doors, whose name has slipped my mind. Bruce Springsteen is the most famous example. Band signs contract with Capitol Records. They release Get the Knack, huge, woo, and then smash, the wrecking ball comes back. They release their second and third albums to less and less notoriety, and almost immediately upon the third album's release, they break up. This is all in the span of like 2 years. It's a wild ride. They stay broken up for a few years, and then late 80s they reform, and they're touring, and they're playing, and they're getting a nice groove going. They replace the drummer with another drummer because Doug Feiger and Bruce Gary, the original drummer, had a certain amount of creative friction. They draft a new drummer, a guy named Billy Ward. They do very well and decide, okay, let's give this whole recording thing another try. So they sign a contract with a very small label. They recruit Don Was to produce the album. Don Was is an old friend of Doug Feiger. And they released Serious Fun in 1991. And as soon as they release the album, the label folds. And so there's virtually no publicity that goes with it. And that's probably just as well, because it's not really that good of an album. Sorry, stop my phone from buzzing here. It's not really that good of an album. There are 2 songs on it that really make it worth investigating. The first is the title track, Serious Fun, and the second is a song called One Day at a Time. If only for these 2 songs, I would say this is a mildly recommended album. I would be just as comfortable recommending that you go to Spotify or Amazon Music, iTunes, wherever you stream your music, and listening to them there. These 2 songs are fantastic, and the rest of the album is largely forgettable. It's one of those where I've listened to the whole thing several times, many times. I'm a fan of this band, and I will periodically plop Serious Fun down and give it a listen. And I know these 2 songs. There are a couple other songs, I Want Love and Rocket Love, and they're okay. But virtually all of what would be side 2 if it were an album is stuff that I've heard, and I couldn't tell you how it goes, even though I've heard it several times. I listen to it, it goes in one ear and out the other, and nothing gains purchase in the ear-to-ear journey. But Serious Fun is fantastic. The song Serious Fun, not the album. If I were to make my list of top 10 Knack songs, individual tracks. Serious Fun is one of the ones that I would very seriously consider as the best song they ever did. I mean, there are like 3, maybe 4 songs that I look at and I think, yeah, that one deserves some consideration here. Serious Fun is one of those. So those 2 songs I like it. Everything else, it's yeah. Okay, from here on out, we've got mostly A's. My first one, or I should say, my next album is number 5, and that is 1980's But the Little Girls Understand. And But the Little Girls Understand is straddling that line between A and B, just like Serious Fun was straddling the line between B and C, right? I want to give it an A minus, but it's probably a B plus. But the Little Girls Understand was the second album that the Knack released, and I am sure you've heard of, or you are familiar with, the concept that anytime an artist releases a double album of original material, you're always afraid that the reaction you're going to get to that work is people telling you, well, you know, if you go through and cut about half of this out, you'd have one really strong album. Why is he bringing this up? I hear you wonder. When the Knack first signed their record deal, they wanted their first album to be a double album, and they wanted it to be the concert set that they were doing that was hugely popular, that created buzz to the point where Bruce Springsteen is coming up and jamming with him on stage, and that makes the folks at the various record companies, especially Capitol Records, say, "Oh, we got to sign these guys," and we bring them in, and they want to do an album of that whole thing. Oh no, cut it down, my friends. And so they whittled it down, and they recorded the best bits from their full repertoire, from their full set. They recorded the best bits and released that as their first album. When time came for them to do a second album, they didn't have time to write any new material, so they just went back and recorded the rest of the stuff. So this is the case where you have the idea of a double album, and then somebody goes through it and edits it down to where you've got the better parts, and that becomes a really focused, really good first album. It's just they took the leftovers and released it as a second album. There are some good songs on here. How Having a Rave Up missed the cut. Why that wasn't included on the first album, I will not ever understand. It is a much better album closer than Frustrated was on Get the Knack. It's just, I have a hard time imagining a better album closer than Having a Rave Up. Fantastic, beautiful song. Hold On Tight, Don't Let Go is a good song. Can't Put a Price on Love is a good song. There are a lot of good bits on here, but there's also just a lot of competent, just not excellent stuff. All of the excellent bits were put on the first album. This is the competent stuff that makes the excellent seem more excellent in the context of the show. So it's a good album. I'm not encouraging you to stay away from it. I just don't know that it belongs in the same tier with the rest of these albums, because the remaining 4 albums are noticeably better than But the Little Girls Understand. Number 4. Number 4 is the last album they recorded. It's 2001's Normalist, the next guy. And this is... it was a surprise to me when I saw it, because even though I'm a huge fan of the band, and I keep my eyes open for, or I used to, I don't anymore, since Doug Feiger passed away, it's like, okay, I'm assuming there's not going to be much more in the way of Knack releases. But I used to keep my eyes open, looking for if they would be, performing somewhere near me. This far away from seeing them. They came to Houston once when I was living in the Houston area, and I found out about it too late to be able to go to it, and it just destroyed me. I tried to convince myself that I would have other opportunities. missed it. Anyway, so I used to keep my eyes open for Knack references, and this came out of nowhere. I mean, I was, prowling Amazon one day, and blink, it came up, and I'm like, what the hell? Where did this come from? And so I got a copy of it. I wasn't expecting much, but it's a pretty good album. It's not quite as good as the top three, but it is markedly better than the two we've already talked about. Normal is the Next Guy has some really good, tightly written, very tightly performed power pop tunes on it. And this is the whole reason I love the Knack in the first place. It's got It's Not Me and 7 Days of Heaven, both of which are really good songs. Normal is the Next Guy, the title track, really good song. So there are bits that are really good about this, and then there are some that are okay. I've heard it and it's okay. I'm not saying it's bad. I just don't know that it's if I'm making an anthology of all of the best Knack stuff. If I'm making a Knack sampler for my friends because I want to encourage them to listen to the Knack, I don't know that very many other songs off the album are going to make it onto that sampler. It's good, and if you're a fan of the band, you're going to like it. It's uneven. That's my note down here. My con. Not much is wrong, just not as good as the other remaining albums. It's uneven. There we go. So Normal is the Next Guy. Like I said, it's A minus, A minus probably. My remaining three albums are all strong A pluses. I really strongly recommend all three of these albums. They are not difficult for me to rank. They are definitely in the order that I'm about to give them. So it's not like, it's a three-way tie and I have to come up with a way. No, this is the order that they belong in. But they are all stellar albums, very highly recommended. Coming in at number 3 is 1998's Zoom. The first 3 albums that they did, very good. I liked them, loved them at the time. Serious Fun. Ooh, that shook my faith a little bit. And so when Zoom came out, I was waiting for that balloon to pop, right? I knew that balloon was going to pop, and it was going to be loud and scary when it did. And I put it on, and right away I thought, okay, we're good. We're good. We're back. This is, good deal. Good. Zoom is a great album. It's got some wonderful songs on it. Pop is Dead is a brilliant tune. Smilin' is good. Harder on You, Tomorrow. There's a lot of really good songs on here. It's also, so for the last 3 albums, Serious Fun, Zoom, and then Normal is the Next Guy, we've got 3 different drummers trying to fill in for Bruce Gary. Billy Ward was the drummer on Serious Fun. David Henderson, I'm pretty sure is the name of the guy who was the drummer on. I'd have to look it up because he bills himself. He's billed in the liners as David Henderson as Holmes Jones, and the Holmes Jones thing is what sticks in my head. His actual name doesn't. But he was the drummer on Normal is the Next Guy. The drummer on Zoom is Terry Bozzio. And if you don't know who Terry Bozzio is, Terry Bozzio, I knew of Terry Bozzio because he drummed a lot with Frank Zappa. And while I've never been a huge fan of Zappa, I will occasionally listen to, I go on occasional, I want to hear some Frank Zappa. Just because I love, every once in a while, hearing really complicated, some would say unnecessarily complicated music performed by very talented musicians. I don't want to listen to that sort of stuff on a regular basis, but every once in a while I do like to hear something that is really intricate, that is just has the snot played out of it. And Terry Bozzio is he's one of the drummers that does that kind of stuff. He's a fantastic drummer. And he just drums the hell out of this album. I mean, every song it's like you got, Gene Krupa in the background just going ape shit on the drums. It's fantastic. I love listening to his drums on this album. Doesn't sound anything like the drum work on the other albums, but it's great. The I like virtually everything about this album. The songwriting is top notch. The musicianship is tight and I mean completely on point. Even, Terry apeshit Bozzio in the background. The one thing about this album, the reason why I'm putting it at number 3, I like Doug Fieger as a singer. I think he is a very good live singer. He's a very entertaining singer to watch. I've seen a handful of concert videos of the Knack. I've got the DVD of the Live at the Rock and Roll Funhouse or Party on Party Pier or whatever the hell the name of that thing is. I've got that DVD and I've watched that DVD 1,000 times. I love watching this guy. Oh man, he is an entertainer. But, and you knew there was a but coming. You could just tell there was a but coming. He has an affectation in his singing that after a while starts to wear on my nerves a little bit. He slides into his notes. Ha, right? Instead of ha, it's ha. And he does that consistently. The higher the note is, the greater the distance between where he starts and where he goes. But there's always like about anywhere from a half tone to a full tone between where he starts and where he ends up. And for the most part, I can deal with it. It doesn't distract me from listening to the rest of it. But there are a couple of songs on Zoom where it's distracting. If I could go in there and okay, if you're doing it, Doug, because you don't think you can hit the note, well, just try. Try to hit that note. I know you can hit it. And if you're doing it because you just think it sounds cool, stop it. But that affectation is the reason why of these 3 albums it's the third, because the older he got, the more he did it. It's all over Normal Is the Next Guy too, but it doesn't detract from Normal Is the Next Guy. I don't know, it doesn't stand out as criticism. It's there, and if I pay attention, I can see it, I can hear it, but it doesn't stand out as I'm listening to it the way it does on Zoom. If we could fix that, it'd be fantastic. Okay, number 2. The number 2 on my list is their debut album, 1979's Get the Knack. Like I said, if you are of a certain vintage, you know this album. Couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a copy of Get the Knack in the summer of 1979. Why do I like the Knack? I like the Knack because they have well-crafted pop tunes and very tight musicianship, and that is Get the Knack. I mean, it's like if you look up tight musicianship in the dictionary, see the Knack, Get the Knack. It's got some wonderful songs on it. It's got My Sharona, My Sharona, we can put that off to the side for now. Let Me Out is my favorite album opening track, I think, of all time. It is brilliant. If this thing had opened with Let Me Out and ended with Having a Rave Up, best bookends I can imagine for an album. It's got Your Number or Your Name, which is a good song. The Siamese Twins, The Monkey and Me, which I always liked. A bunch of songs that are let's call the radio station and see if they'll play it because it's got dirty words in it. Yeah, my sense of humor was very mature even then. There's really only one problem with Get the Knack. Okay, 2 problems if you count the whole, okay, I'm tired of listening to it. If I hear My Sharona one more time. Overplay is only a problem for people who are listening to the radio. If you're not listening to the radio, if you're listening to things that you like instead of things that other people are telling you should like, you don't tend to react to overplay as much, because overplay is a reaction to somebody else choosing your music for you. And I've always chosen my own music, so I don't have a problem with that. I think My Sharona is just a brilliant song. I think it is extremely well written musically. And the guitar solo that Burton Avere does on the full extended album version, not the 45 single edit version where they cut out some of the best parts of the solo, the soulless bastards at Capitol Records. But if you listen to the whole solo, that solo is my holy trinity of guitar solos are Burton Avere from My Sharona, David Gilmour from Comfortably Numb, and Skunk Baxter from Ricky Don't Lose That Number. We get those three solos. That right there is why I play guitar. That right there is what I aspire to do if I'm going to aspire to be a lead guitarist, which is not in my wheelhouse. I'm strictly rhythm. I don't want to make it choir sing. So if we're looking at cons for the album, Overplay is not going to be one of them. It's one that a lot of people will have. It's not one that I have. My only real con here is the blatant and pretty much endemic misogyny that runs throughout this album. This album is not friendly to women. And I understand artistically what Feiger and Avere were trying to do. They were trying to make music about, juvenile boys for juvenile boys, right? They were writing about 16, 17-year-old guys, and they were trying to speak to that 16, 17-year-old guy mindset. And I'm not necessarily saying that every 16, 17-year-old guy out there is a misogynist, but in my day, the overwhelming majority of them were. So I see what they were trying to do. And there are a couple of times where, I really liked the song when I was younger, but now she's so selfish. I got to distance myself a little bit. My Sharona sounds like a creeper, pervy, adult, cringy, rapey guy. But no, it's cringy, pervy young guy who's cringy, perving on a girl who is roughly his age. It's not yes, there is a reference to the younger kind, but it's no, this is not Christine 16. It's not that level of perviness. But there is still that level of that kind of misogyny that runs throughout the album, which is a problem, which is the reason why, even though I think it's a wonderful album, I can't put it at number one here. Now, the good news is the album I can put at number one deserves to be there, and that is 1981's Round Trip. If there is a part of the overall story of the Knack that I think is particularly sad, it's that they broke up almost immediately after releasing Round Trip. Because Round Trip is wonderful. It is a fantastic album. And if they could have found a way to stick together long enough to do some touring, to build a little bit of audience back, I think the quality of this album would have saved the band a lot of heartache further down the road. There are some really fantastic songs on here. Radiating Love is good. Just Wait and See is just a perfect little pop tune. I love Art War because I'm not too fond of critics, and it's easy to see why a band that had been savaged so much by the critics would write a song about art criticism, which and it has Another Lousy Day in Paradise, which, if I'm looking for the best Knack song, I nominated Serious Fun from Serious Fun. I'm nominating Another Lousy Day in Paradise from Round Trip. These are the two. that if what is their overall best song, it's going to be one of these two. Another Lousy Day in Paradise is the Knack roller coaster experience distilled down to about a 3.25 minute long song. It's brilliant. So what are the weaknesses of the album? What are the cons? I'm looking at my notes down here. The closest I can come to a con is that it's got the song Pay the Devil, Ooh Baby Ooh, which is just fun to say. Just drop it into conversation. So what did you do today? Oh, Pay the Devil, Ooh Baby Ooh. It's not a bad song, okay? Bert Navarre, if you're watching, I'm not shitting on your song. It's not a bad song. I like Pay the Devil. But it is a slow country waltz. It is like the exact opposite of what you would expect if you found out, oh, the Knack has a single coming out. Okay, well, what have their singles been? They've been My Sharona and Good Girls Don't and Baby Talks Dirty, and so it's going to be a fast drum beat with kind of guitar riff going. And no, it's a slow country waltz. Oh, wow. And yes, Pay the Devil, Ooh Baby Ooh was the lead-off single from Round Trip. Man, there were some people in that administrative structure that just did not want this band to survive. Now, Pay the Devil, Ooh Baby Ooh is atypical. It's not what you would think of if you're thinking of what is a typical Knack song. It is not what you're thinking of, but it's not a bad song. It's a good song, and it is very well performed. I think it's got some of Doug Feiger's better vocals. He doesn't do the slidey thing very much, and it's not an easy tune to sing. I've tried singing it. And so I give thumbs up to Pay the Devil. It's just not. I mean, for $1 million, I would not pick that to be a single off of this album, which is not really a criticism of the album. So I would say this is arguably a perfect album. I can't really find anything that I would do that would improve it. I can change it, but I don't know that the change would result in a stronger album. I really like Round Trip. I just, like I said, if they could have somehow found a way to keep it together long enough to do some touring off of Round Trip and to try to build an audience for Round Trip, I shudder to think what could have happened. As good as Zoom and Normal as the Next Guy are, I think what would have come after Serious Fun, or after Round Trip, what would have come after Round Trip would have been even better if they could have kept that momentum going. So, but overall, like I said, I've got one album that I don't know if I can strongly recommend it or not, but it's one of the albums that I'm going to rush into my burning house to save because it's got Serious Fun, which is, I got to have a copy of that song, right? So there's none of these albums that I'm ever going to cull out of my library, right? I love the Knack. And that's it for today. If you enjoyed this chat, please hit the like button. If you want to enjoy similar chats in the future, then I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. And if you subscribe to the channel, go ahead and click that little notification bell because, come on. If you disagree with anything I've said, or if you want to underscore anything I've said, or if you just want to give a generic thumbs up to the Knack, leave a comment below. I always appreciate the conversation. So, again, thanks for watching, and I hope the rest of your day is glorious. See you soon.